The Christmas season is upon us, and so it's time to rewatch all the Christmas classics. It's a Wonderful Life, Elf, A Christmas Story, Gremlins If You're Cool, and the first two Home Alone movies that many people rewatch every single year. But did you know that there were 6 total Home Alone movies? Because I sure didn't. So today, I'm going to take a look at all of them and rank each film on this tier list. So let's start where this franchise began. The first Home Alone has always been one of my favorite Christmas movies, and I have seen it once a year for the past like 20 years. It's kind of the perfect family movie with tons of entertainment value. For starters, even after seeing this movie as much as I have, it is still really funny. There are so many memorable and funny bits like
I'm living alone!
or
Buzz, your girlfriend. Woof.
or maybe the most iconic. I can almost quote this entire movie from memory, but these moments still get a chuckle out of me. And the entire finale where Kevin defends his house from both Harry and Marv is so iconic. He really lays the hurt on these guys, and again, it's hilarious. And Chris Columbus's directing adds a lot of visual style to these more action-y sequences. The shot of Marv slowly stepping on the nail, or of him sticking his head through the doggy door are all incredibly memorable. And there are so many scenes in this movie that also have memorable imagery. And speaking of iconic things from the first Home Alone, we have to talk about Angels with Filthy Souls, the fake movie that Kevin watches that we all thought for years was a real movie. What an absolutely fun and creative little bit to include in a film. And Kevin using the movie he's so scared of to warn off unwanted visitors not once but twice is a really fun reoccurring joke. And I've said it many times before, if I had the opportunity to make any movie, I would make a feature-length version of Angels with Filthy Souls. Not because it would be a good movie, chances are it would be awful, but it's something I think society needs. The thing that really elevates Home Alone from a fun family movie to a Christmas classic is Kevin and his character arc. When we first meet Kevin, he's a helpless and spoiled child who doesn't appreciate the family or the life he has. But after he's left home alone, he's forced into a situation where he has to fend for himself without any help from his family. And as things get harder and scarier, he learns to be more brave and to appreciate the family that was always there for him. It makes the reunion between him and his family at the end of the movie feel more earned. And Macaulay Culkin is fantastic as Kevin McAllister. This is absolutely one of the all-time best child performances. He nails it as this clever, funny, and at times sadistic little child. And his line delivery is unmatched.
I can tell you that. Why not? Because you're a stranger.
Another side to Kevin's story is Old Man Marley. He is by far my favorite part of Home Alone. When we're first introduced to him, he's this terrifying old man who killed people with a shovel and keeps their corpses in a salt bucket. But as we and Kevin learn more about him, we find out that he's not a killer at all. He's really just an older version of Kevin. He pushed away his family and now lives alone. But after Kevin goes through his character arc of learning to appreciate his family, he's able to give Marley the helpful advice he needs to help him grow and learn. And at the end of the movie where we see Marley hugging his granddaughter and crying, man, it almost gets me every single time. Shout out to Robert Blossom for his great performance. Home Alone also features 2 iconic villains. Harry and Marv, aka the Wet Bandits, really are the perfect villains for a movie like this. They're wacky, they can take a beating like no other, but they are still actually intimidating at times. While you never actually feel like Kevin is in danger, Harry was seriously gonna bite off his finger, which that's certainly a detail in this movie. Wow, we got Armie Hammer up in here, I guess. But they're despicable and slimy enough to enjoy watching them get punished over and over again. And both Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern are perfect for these roles. Another thing that makes Home Alone so special is how fleshed out all the tertiary characters are. Kevin's entire family feels unique from one another, and you can tell who they are by how they speak and act. Like when Frank almost kills his own kid to avoid getting wet. And all the family is perfectly casted, especially Catherine O'Hara as Kevin's mom, John Hurd as Kevin's dad, Devin Ratray as Buzz, Gary Batman, John Candy, and even Kieran Culkin as Fuller, which I just found out that this was Kieran Culkin. Crazy, this kid is on track to win an Oscar. The last thing I will say about the first Home Alone is that it has an incredible score by John Williams. Somehow I've been making videos on this channel for a year now, and I have yet to talk about a John Williams score. In my teenage years when I was in high school band, I was a huge John Williams fan, and Home Alone was always one of my favorites. It does such a good job of properly setting the tone for the different scenes in the film, and the main theme is just so darn beautiful. I love the first Home Alone. It's a classic in every sense of the word, and it's one I always enjoy watching with the family, so it's going in S tier.
Hey guys, I'm in New York City just hanging out.
Home Alone 2 Lost in New York has a reputation of being a hollow rehash of the first movie, and I have to say that is absolutely not entirely true. It's hard to look at the surface of this film and not see all the bits it repeats from the first movie. Kevin gets in trouble with his family. Again. The McAllisters oversleep and rush to the airport. Again. Kevin has to fight off Harry and Marv. Again. While this movie is exceedingly similar from a plot perspective, it takes these familiar bits and makes them bigger. Instead of Kevin just getting in trouble, he fights Buzz on a public stage and embarrasses the entire McAllister family. Instead of the McAllister family rushing to the airport and accidentally leaving Kevin alone, Kevin happens to follow someone else who isn't his dad and winds up in New York City. And instead of Kevin fighting off the sticky bandits with micro machines, Christmas ornaments, and spiders, he's now causing them blunt force trauma to the head with bricks, electrocuting them to the point where they turn into skeletons, and attempting to burn them to death not once, but twice. Yeah, the theory that Kevin grows up and becomes Jigsaw is maybe a little bit true. But really, the hyped up antics of this movie make them stand out when compared to the first. Kevin doesn't have much of a compelling character story in this one, but I think he's more of a fully fleshed out character. He has motivations and ideals and morals. He's a big fan of Christmas and thinks kids everywhere deserve a good Christmas, which is why he risks his life to stop Harry and Marv from taking the money from the children's hospital. And he says one of the most baller lines in all of cinema in the process.
This is it. No turning back. Another Christmas in the trenches.
Another really big positive for Lost in New York is that I think the movie might actually be funnier than the first. Humor is subjective, of course, but I found a lot of this movie's bits and jokes hilarious, like Kevin's first reaction to the pigeon lady,
Sick.
or Marv getting killed by a brick, or Angels with Even Filthier Souls, a fake sequel to the fake movie in the first film. And this scene is mostly funny because the movie says that Tim Curry is smooching Cliff, and Cliff is all like, "Nuh-uh, no way, I don't kiss guys." The new setting also adds to the fun of the movie with a ton of new characters and locations, like the Plaza Hotel with this idiotic staff led by Tim Curry, who is great in the film, by the way. The Plaza Hotel also has that other cameo. Listen, I'm not gonna say anything about this guy, but do you think anyone in the room was like, yeah, this guy is eventually gonna be the 45th and 47th president of the United States? Freaking wild. And other locations like Kevin's uncle's house, or Duncan's toy chest, or Central Park with the bird lady, all help to plant the viewer in New York City. Also, quick side note, I was actually here once. The outside of Kevin's uncle's house was filmed on the Universal Pictures backlot, and these scenes were actually shot in the daytime because at the time, child actors couldn't shoot at night, and the filmmakers made it look like nighttime because filmmaking is just magic. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, mostly because it is just very similar to the first movie, and a lot of what I said about that film carries over to this one, but it's still a very enjoyable experience overall, so I'm going to put it in A tier.
This Disney DVD is enhanced with Disney's Fast Play.
Just a heads up, there are no HD versions of Home Alone 3, 4, and 5, so we're gonna have to settle for the garbage DVD quality. Despite being titled Home Alone 3, this movie is not a continuation of Kevin's story from the first two movies. Instead, it's a brand new story with brand new characters, and it's not the best. I don't know, it's a mostly harmless movie, but it really lacks the charm of the first two. Let's look at these new characters. Alex and his family are incredibly bland. His dad is pretty much not a character. His brother and sister are mean and bad. That's their entire personality. There's some novelty with the sister being an early Scarlett Johansson role, but that's whatever. The mom has a little more than the rest of the family. She's an actual good mom who takes care of her kids. The only reason she actually leaves Alex home alone is because she could potentially get fired from her job. So you can really feel for her in that way. The villains in this movie are awful in every conceivable way. There's 4 of them, and I don't know any of their names, so I just refer to them as Woman, Fake Alec Baldwin, Ponytail, and Greg. None of these characters have any personality. They're certainly not anywhere close to Harry and Marv. Also, they're not just normal burglars. They're international hitmen hired by this guy who has a shark. Yeah, the story is friggin' nuts. These goofballs are attempting to smuggle this chip into the United States. The chip is a device that allows missiles to bypass ground-to-air defenses. Harry and Marv were just trying to steal stuff so they can get money. These people are committing acts of terror. So they hide the chip in an RC car, but while at the airport, they lose the car. Alex winds up with the car and now has to defend the chip and himself from terrorists. It's an absolutely bonkers story, but not in a good way. Alex does have a character arc, but it's not the most compelling, and it's largely a rehash of Kevin's story in the first film. He starts off really scared and terrified that crooks are gonna get him, and then he has to face his fears and becomes more brave and blah blah blah. The story isn't well done at all, it's weak in the script, and I think Alex D. Lynn struggles to portray that change in his performance. I don't want to completely dunk on this young actor though, because I do think he was actually good throughout most of the movie. The trap scenes in Home Alone 3 were also really disappointing. The entire finale of the film where Alex defends his home from the invaders was just kinda bad and not funny at all. It was also just really uncreative. At many points in the film, we see how Alex is a really smart kid who engineers a goldfish feeder, or is smart enough to try and film the robbers. But his traps are really boring. He lets them fall in mud, or he sprays them with cold water, or oh no, he spray paints their eyes, ouchie. The closet punching thing is cool, but that's really it. This kid's potential for punishment is nothing compared to Kevin McAllister, and they're trying way too hard to recreate the funniest moments from the first two movies. Try to watch this clip and not cringe. Just awful. Home Alone 3 also has some serious pacing issues. It's only an hour and 40 minutes, but it feels long. It was just really slow at times. But the absolute worst part of Home Alone 3 is that it's not Christmassy enough. It takes place in wintertime and I guess around Christmas time, but it doesn't have any Christmas themes or imagery or any Christmas magic. It's just a very blah winter movie. Home Alone 3 is not good, but it does have some decent entertainment value. So I'm going to put it in C tier.
Who are you people?
Wow. Home Alone 4 is terrible. Everything about this movie is just awful in every single way. For starters, this is not just another story with new characters. No, it's another movie about Kevin McAllister and his family, the McAllisters, and he has to stop Marv from robbing the house. What's the matter? You're acting like you don't recognize your favorite characters from the first two movies. Yeah, all the characters were recast for this sequel. I'm guessing because the budget was too small to afford anyone from the original. And yeah, none of these characters hold a candle to their original counterparts. But even outside of the casting, there were some really strange changes. Kevin's parents are in the middle of a divorce, which I guess does make sense after the events of the first two movies, but it feels really unnecessary to destroy the family dynamic of the original series. Also, a couple of the McAllister children have been Thanos snapped out of existence. Lenny and Jeff are just gone for some reason. I guess maybe they died or something. Maybe that's why the parents are getting a divorce. It's a bit dark, but like, where else did they go? Also, Buzz is significantly younger in this movie. My current theory is that Buzz died in the same tragic accident as Lenny and Jeff, and to cope with that loss, the parents adopted a new kid and renamed him Buzz. I know I sound like a schizo talking about this movie, but I swear, Home Alone 4 will make you lose your mind. You can make the argument that this is a different continuity than the first two movies, and that's why the kids are missing, but Kevin recognizes Marv, which implies that the first two movies did happen. But Kevin himself is the most affected by these changes. He's just not the same character at all. He's no longer the funny and clever kid from the first two films. Home Alone 4's Kevin is just so annoying. He gets on his parents' nerves. He gets on the help's nerves. He's just not written well at all. This is not the same character. But I will say, I actually think Mike Weinberg, the young actor who played Kevin, actually did a solid job. It's normal for child performances to be really flat and have bad line delivery, but he was actually very emotive and delivered his lines fairly well, especially in the beginning of the movie when Buzz bullies him. I mean, look at him. His blood is boiling. He's about to turn into the amazing Bulk.
What the hell is that?
Well, it ain't Barney the purple dinosaur!
And most of the other cast is also not terrible. Like, there's no Oscar-worthy performances or anything, but most of the adults are able to act out this material perfectly fine. This is, except for the main villain of the movie, Marv. Marv is played by French Stewart, and he's so bad here. He's just doing a really bad impression of Daniel Stern's Marv, and for some reason they decided to make Marv not look like Marv. Do you notice anything about this costume? What if I slip in this picture right next to him? They dressed him up like Harry for some reason. How do you mess up this bad? The other villains are Marv's wife and his mom, and they're both terrible. Overall, just bad villains in this movie. Also, their plan isn't just to rob this really nice house. There's a prince visiting Kevin's dad's new girlfriend, and Marv's plan is to kidnap the prince and sell him for ransom money.
Boy, That escalated quickly.
Home Alone 4 also features some really poor filmmaking. The directing can be very strange at times. There are a bunch of handheld shots and shaky cam for some reason. I mean, look at this conversation between Kevin's parents. It really looks like the tripod broke on set that day, and they just needed to get the shot. The dialogue is really terrible, the score is really unfitting, and the cinematography is as bland as Five Guys. But the absolute worst part about Home Alone 4 is that it is boring. This whole movie is just a really miserable watch because it trades the fun, relatable antics of the first two films for a slow drama about divorce. It's a baffling decision, and even the more Home Alone-y bits are lame and uninspired. Aw, Kevin really got Marv by spraying him with water. Oh no, he pushed him out a window. It's just so incredibly lame. Home Alone 4 is awful. There are some highlights like the actors and no, that's about it. This movie is going in D tier.
My life is like a video game trying.
Home Alone: The Holiday Heist is the most mid movie of this entire franchise. Well, it's actually slightly below mid. I don't know, it's a mostly harmless movie, but it's also not exceptional in any way. The family at the center of this film is as generic as they get. Parents are kind of controlling and they try to micromanage their children. The sister is an angsty teen who's always texting on the phone. And Finn, the main kid of the movie, is a friggin' loser who plays games and has no life. Holy. Yeah, The Holiday Heist really does have an anti-gamer sentiment, and you can see that through Finn's character arc. When we first meet him, he doesn't have any friends or a life outside of gaming. He doesn't care as much about his family or the neighborhood kids or anything else. He's just trying to grind camos at Black Ops 6. But he has a somewhat well-realized arc of appreciating the life around him and appreciating his family. He has a conversation with his only friend who's another gamer dork, and the dork reveals that while he gets to play video games all day every day, he's too poor to go home for Christmas and visit his family. And Finn is all like, but I like Christmas. And after that conversation and his experience fighting off the burglars, he gains a better appreciation for the real world. But I will say, the constant video games are for losers boomer humor just doesn't work at all. It's as cringe as you would expect it to be, and it also feels out of place for a kids movie. When your target demographic is families and kids, why would you think taking a negative standpoint on something kids love would be a good idea? Something that honestly surprised me about this movie is that it has decent villains. Maybe I just liked them this time because they're not terrorists or child kidnappers. They're just normal burglars. But they actually have personality. The ringleader is played by Malcolm McDowell, friggin' Dr. Monty. That's right, 2 COD Zombies references in one video.
Just get in the elevator. Get it. Go. Hurry!
He's a typical serious burglar, but he has a reasonable motivation for wanting to steal this painting. It was a portrait of his great-grandmother, and he wants the painting for himself. And the 2 other burglars are just kind of funny. Jessica is always crying because she misses her ex-boyfriend who used to work on their crew. And Mr. Hughes is just a funny guy who likes to eat cookies. Unlike Home Alone 3 or 4, The Holiday Heist is actually somewhat entertaining. Now, the first hour or so is stale. There's no way around that. It's a very boring build-up to this movie's finale. But once the burglars actually start to rob Finn's house, it's actually decent. There are some cool ideas on display, like the multiple Finns showing the different traps he sets, him getting ideas from the games he plays, or this scene where Finn's gamer friend tries to warn Finn's parents only for them to think that he kidnapped their children, which results in him getting swatted.
FBI, open up!
Home Alone: The Holiday Heist isn't the greatest movie in the world. It's not even anywhere close to the greatest movie of this series, but it's not awful. You could definitely watch worse, so I'm going to throw it in C tier. Before we talk about the final Home Alone movie, I just want to say we are getting closer and closer to 100,000 subscribers, and once we get there, I will drop a tier list of every Star Wars movie and show. So if you want to watch me suffer through the acolytes like how I suffered through Home Alone 4, hit that subscribe button so that video can happen. Now let's move on to the final Home Alone film.
Let us commence forth. British?
Home Alones 3, 4, and 5 were bad, but Home Sweet Home Alone is straight up offensive. Not only is this a bad movie in terms of writing, directing, and everything else that makes a movie, but it also shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what Home Alone is. Let's look at the main kid for this movie, Max Mercer, played by Archie Yates, who you might remember as the Nazi child in Jojo Rabbit. Now, I want to be perfectly clear, everything I'm about to say is directed toward the character Max, and not this young actor. But with that said, Max is by far the worst kid in this whole franchise, and I was actively rooting for him to get hurt. He's just a mean, nasty, and sadistic child with no redeeming qualities at all. Even in the scene that introduces him, he's being a complete menace to this guy in his own house.
boy doesn't want to share his dolly?
The f you say to me, you little
He even has the goal to ask for one of his sodas after that. Despicable. And there's plenty of examples of him being terrible. He treats his family poorly, he takes toys from the needy, and he's generally hostile to everyone he meets. And he also steals from these people who are losing their home. Now, he didn't steal the $200,000 doll like we're led to believe, but he did steal nonetheless. The movie tries to explain why Max is the way he is. He feels neglected by his parents, who were taken by the holiday craziness and are occupied with all the visiting family and whatnot. And he's so neglected that the entire family forgets to make sure he gets on a plane for the family vacation. But he doesn't have an arc of realizing he's treating people bad or being a jerk to everyone around him or anything like that. He stays the same throughout the entire runtime. And honestly, when it came down to it, I was rooting for the burglars over him. Which, speaking of, these two are the only enjoyable characters of the entire film. Jeff and Pam McKenzie are reasonably likable people that you can really sympathize with. They're forced to sell their house because they can no longer afford it, and they feel like failed parents. And they're not perfect people, and they do make mistakes, like breaking into Max's house when they think he stole their $200,000 doll, but they show both hesitation and remorse over that, and they more than learned their lesson after Max tried to actually murder them.
We just want to
Which, let's talk about that. The big Home Alone finale feels completely wrong, because the audience is on the burglar's side. Kevin trying to hurt Harry and Marv in the first two movies was fine, because they were flat out bad people in the middle of a crime and they had it coming. But Pam and Jeff were good people forced into a bad situation. So as an audience member, it felt bad watching them get smacked in the head with pool balls, get lit on fire, and get shot with sharp pointed Nerf darts. I mean, seriously, this kid was out for blood. They tried to explain this by making Max think that Jeff and Pam are going to sell him to an old lady or something, but the whole story happening over a misunderstanding is so incredibly weak. And the film's conclusion also makes zero sense. After Max, Pam, and Jeff finally talk to one another, they all realize this was just a huge misunderstanding, and everyone has been just a little bit silly.
We just want to talk.
And since Max is home alone, he's going to live with them until his parents get home for some reason. Yeah, all of a sudden Max trusts them enough to stay in their house, and they're perfectly okay with letting the kid who just tried to kill them stay with them. It's a baffling writing decision. Home Sweet Home Alone is a Disney Plus original movie, and it's your pretty typical Disney nostalgia slop. So of course there are tons of callbacks and Easter eggs, and it all feels incredibly shallow and disingenuous. This shot with the floating heads is a direct callback to the first movie. There's a ton of John Williams music thrown in to emotionally manipulate the audience, especially at the end when Max reunites with his mom. That scene actually upset me. How dare you try to replicate the magic of the original movie? I spit on you. And Buzz is here too, and he's just as weird here as he was in the original too. He gets kinda creepy with Pam, he eats a gross burrito, and he mentions how Kevin got into home security, and that's literally all he did. Home Sweet Home Alone is a truly trying experience. It made just about every bad decision it could have made, and is by far the worst Home Alone movie of all time. So it's going in D tier. And that's the Home Alone tier list. This ranking turned out pretty much exactly how I expected it would, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I'm ever gonna sit down and watch Home Alones 3 through 6 ever again. But how would you rank the Home Alone movies? Let me know down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.